We had a question from a lady.
Thank you very much. My name is Tammy Overby. I'm with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I run our Asia program. First of all, I want to thank Secretary Nides for the great work they did last week with the Global Business Summit, but also to have him make the decision to come all the way out here to support this conference. You really are putting your money where your mouth is, and we all appreciate it. I have to say I've been coming to APCAC meetings for many years, and I don't ever recall seeing such a distinguished panel of chiefs of mission from around Asia. So my question is very simple. What next? How do we keep this momentum going? And how are you going to top this great meeting?
Wow. Why don't we start at the far end with Ambassador Roos and see if we can get everybody to make a quick comment. Ready? Yes. I'm going to have everybody make a little bit comment about what you'd like to see as the next steps.
Well, I think the next step is to ensure that Deputy Secretary Nides remains the Deputy Secretary for the indefinite future.
That's a good start.
It's hard to come after an answer that elegant. I'm not so sure what I would say. I have, some of you have heard me say in the past, and I'll just repeat it here, I think we need to be engaged with the small and medium-sized enterprises in Southeast Asia in ways in which we are not. And we have to be engaged with them by way of sharing with them why our ideas are ultimately the ideas that will move this market forward. They can be enormously strong advocates with their respective governments in this connection. And one thing about which I'm most proud, having shared only some modest involvement with it, however, is the development of an ASEAN business club in Malaysia that has been created as an interlocutor for American business. I believe it will be an advocate for regulatory change throughout the region, and I think that's the kind of thing that we need to see. We need to have linkage between all the things that you do, and in addition, our EU friends and friends in Japan, to be in conversations with business in the region in order for them to become informed advocates as to what needs to happen to move it forward in the ways which will advantage not only themselves but the world.
I'd like to see APCAC hold its next conference in Taipei.
I guess I hope what's next is you'll take some of the best practices that were really so briefly mentioned here back to your chambers and back to your headquarters, and hopefully decide what you liked and bring that to the embassies where you have the strongest commercial interests, so that we can move some of these best practices out further into the field.
No, there we go. I think, this is obviously a communications format. I think we have for many years done an excellent job on advocating and communications. We have terrific commercial counselors, officers in the region. Our economic counselors, we're all married up with, agriculture, commercial, our economic officers from the State Department. But I think this forum can begin maybe a more strategic level conversation, and I have a hunch that we sometimes miss each other a little bit on that, on the formats that we have for communications tend to be fairly discrete on certain issues in certain areas, and I think we could benefit from a more strategic level conversation, but I don't quite know how to connect with the right people in the right way what demand is there out there in the business community. Obviously we have that with the AmCham, but I think back in the United States, and we've had conference calls, for example, with U.S. Chamber, and that's one way, but I'm not sure it's the best or the only way.
I think for those of us in the Korean Peninsula, it's obvious. It's chorus, chorus, chorus. It took us a long time to get this point, and I think we need to keep up the momentum by making sure that the implementation proceeds smoothly. I mean, Tammy, of course, was one of the key players in this effort, and I know she will make sure that we keep up the momentum on this. Thanks.
For me, in Indonesia, we have a great relationship with the AmCham. The problem we have is, I'd say USA Inc.'s problem is all the folks who aren't there and aren't in AmCham. So I think it's important to try to focus on the people who aren't normally at these meetings, or the companies that aren't normally represented but have opportunities, and trying to find a way to push out from the United States and encourage people, frankly, to be a little bit more aggressive in seeking out new markets.
I think what I see as the big next step is institutionalizing some of the things that we've been talking about. You know, as much I love having Deputy Secretary Nides in this job too, but it really shouldn't matter who's sitting in that job or who's sitting here at this table. We should have processes in place so that, you know, this momentum continues. So I've got a few things. One is we're going to work in Australia to have members of the mission ex officio on every single AmCham board. For each of the local boards and for the national board, so that we have this constant dialogue, and it doesn't depend on whether or not you've got a business-oriented chief of mission. Secondly, we're working with the AmCham boards to set up subcommittees on particular areas of opportunity. You know, for example, healthcare, pharmaceuticals, that sort of thing, and in Australia is now one of them, and focusing particularly on the small and mid-sized businesses, because the big players already know about Australia. It's the small and mid-sized businesses who often miss out. And then third, working more to give ideas to people back in the States. So the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, I want to thank you. You've set up an Australia working group and are working towards sending a delegation out in May. That's just the kind of public-private partnership that we're looking for. And so setting up country-by-country working groups, I think would be a great opportunity.
We have a couple more questions, and then I'm going to save some time for the press as well, but let's take this question here, and then I'll get to the back. Right here, in the front. Thanks. Yeah. Quick.
Thank you. My name is Chris Merck, and I'm with the American Chamber of Commerce in China, located in Beijing. I have a question that I guess I should direct to Ambassador Marciel, because you inspired it by a reference to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. And I certainly agree with your point that that has been very useful over the course of my business career in China for the last 15 years, and many other people that I know about in serving to protect American companies from some requests. But I'd like to ask you or any of your colleagues who want to address a broader question of whether the U.S. government has an integrated strategy to address corruption, and if so, how would you articulate that, and how do you think we are doing? With respect to the FCPA, the Justice Department litigation strategy suffered recently a very embarrassing collapse in court, which I'm sure you're all aware of. With respect to the government procurement agreement at the WTO, which we in China regard as an anti-corruption measure because it adds transparency and accountability to a very important market segment, we seem to be making rather slow progress in bringing on new signatories. With respect to the Treasury Department's new reporting requirements on individuals and on foreign financial institutions to report assets and bank accounts and so forth, there is now a new compliance burden, but I haven't heard from Treasury or anybody else whether that's actually generating useful information. So the strategic question for anybody who wants to address it, but maybe starting with Ambassador Marciel, is what's the overarching strategy here, and how are we doing?
Well, I will speak on it from my experience in Indonesia, where corruption remains a major problem. First, I mean, my personal opinion, we can't fix this. The corruption problem in Indonesia is an Indonesian problem and needs to be fixed by the Indonesians. What we try to do is support the people in the country who are working to try to deal with it, like the Anti-Corruption Commission, but also a lot of work on governance, training, supporting e-procurement, and there's a whole series of different measures that we do, and obviously working through the OECD internationally with a lot of support for anti-corruption measures. And I think those are useful, but without the political will and the strong commitment of the host government, it's a real uphill battle.